Okay. Unplanned, unscripted, off the cuff video here. So I'm going to jump right in. Let's start with the idea of 3 games. There are 3 games right now. There are 3 game ideas that I think about. So one is something that is a very, very small unit tactical. A small unit tactical game that basically is unlike so many designs out there, because fundamentally I think all of our designs out there are deeply, deeply beholden to our models and understanding of World War II combat, and so all of the limitations that go along with that. So that is a small unit tactical team scale game that basically allows me to play recent combat actions or very near future combat actions. Again, with the totally new way of looking at combat effects, certainly command control, new way of looking at turn structure, etc. So that's one. 2, the idea I think of as a game that I don't see out there. So these are 3 games that I think of and games I don't see out there. So number 2 is so I've just barely scratched the surface of games on the very high end of the complexity scale. So we're talking, I can go right down the list, right? So for World War II campaigns and operations, we're talking OCS. For tactical, we're talking about ASL. For Civil War, we're talking Great Battles of the American Civil War. For Napoleonic, Slabatai. For Age of Kings, it's Battles from the Age of Reason. But what I don't see is a game with that. Let's take Battles from the Age of... Actually, I should take a game I'm familiar with. So I guess I'm barely familiar with Labatai, the premier version of the rules. So I'm barely familiar with those. So I'll say what I'd like to see is a game with that level of detail or more. So with at least that level of detail, at least the level of Labatai detail, applied to basically the Dark Ages or the middle, the Dark Ages. So battles of Charlemagne and et cetera. So that period, roughly 500 to 1000 AD, battles or fights of some sort, but done to the level of detail again of Labatai or better. Now that's number 2. Number 3 is the third idea I have, which obviously I haven't seen out there, is a game that allows me specifically, literally allows me to game simulate, play through future warfare, and based on the multi-domain battle concept, the emerging multi-domain battle concept, I should say. So I'm going to jump right in here. Obviously, I'm going to be talking about MDB, and as I talk about MDB, I'm talking about the kind of the game, the vision that I see here. And this is something that I think about literally grabbing, a photocopy of a real world. I'm probably going to go. I'm thinking of something as timely and as operationally significant as I can possibly find. So I'll probably start with the Suwalki Gap. So take a real map of that area, for a photocopy of the map, and again, literally grab pieces of paper or half-inch squares of paper and start putting together a first mock-up of a war game. So I am thinking, I'm not saying that I'll do it, but I'm saying I'm thinking in my mind, I guess, the utility, the value of getting something like this on a table. So again, we're talking about MDB, multi-domain battle, and obviously I'm going to be talking about it here and talking about again, it has to do with how a war game might look. Okay, so first we have to talk about MDB. I'm grabbing pieces here. So let's start at I will be starting at the beginning, but for decades, Airland Battle and its successors. So we're talking, the successors are full spectrum operations, full dimensional operate. I'm not going in order: full dimensional operations, then full spectrum operations, then unified land operations. But these are all Airland Battle. You could say they're all Airland Battle derived operational concepts. So for decades, Airland Battle, ALB, and its successors met operational demands and attempts by adversaries to counter its strengths. We're talking about the U.S. military here. But today and into the future, ground combat forces confront threats that adapted and modernized their military specifically to defeat how the joint force currently fights. And again, a war game that allows these threats and these capabilities to be simulated and modeled, etc. That Win in a Complex World slide there in the background is kind of one of many images that kind of fire the imagination for how a war game might look like during most of our recent history. So I started with Airland Battle. I mean, there was at least one game made that I've heard about called Airland Battle. There have been a handful of other games that more or less overtly tried to integrate Airland Battle as a doctrine into the game. I'm trying to think. There's a game. It's funny, the name escapes me, but I know there's a game. It's in my collection, and it has something like, some of your units on the map are Airland Battle capable, and it's like something like, I can't remember the detail, but something like if units that are Airland Battle capable roll on a Airland Battle CRT, which is different than a normal non-Airland Battle CRT. So it's already been done for something, in the past. It's been done for Airland Battle doctrine. I'm talking about a war game that looks forward and that is basically integrating what is an emerging operational concept, not even doctrine yet. If I can make that any more blunt. During most of our recent history, the only domain that's been truly contested has been the land domain. I highlighted this because, when we think of war games, we think of primarily the land domain. Of course, there are naval games and there are air war games, which is completely accurate. But even our war games are divided by domains, and the overwhelming majority of war games are land domain war games. And then when you get up to the higher levels where you have more than one domain in the game, it's not unusual to have like basically sub games, right? So you have within a World War II high operational level war game, you have your land rules, which are really a game by themselves. Then you have your naval rules, which are really a game. I mean, the good example of this that I remember that I have some tiny bit of experience with is European Theater of Operations war game, the Deep TSR box war game that had a distinct naval war game basically, and an air war game and a land war game. So the idea here is the MDB war game would be multi-domain from the start. So there would the rules and the model would have to be built. I would want it to be built without being domain, I guess, focused. But I'm not exactly sure how that's going to be done. The Joint Force has enjoyed an unprecedented level of freedom of action in the airspace, maritime, and cyber domains. This will not be the case in the future. This, again, is something it'd be great if it could be modeled and then it could be wargamed to see what this actually means. Contemporary and emerging threats seek to gain control of contested spaces, not only in the air and on the land, but at sea, in space, and cyberspace. So again, the war game would be as much space and cyberspace as land and air and sea, as well as the electromagnetic spectrum. So I imagine this game has got to be robust in the area of EM warfare, EM warfare, electromagnetic warfare, and the cognitive dimensions of human perception. That would be really cool. While I think of the 5 joint domains of air, land, air, space, and cyberspace, it would be cool if the game also could actually somehow model cognitive dimension. What is it? I don't know. There are some ideas there. There's some ideas there. Multi-domain battle requires flexible, resilient ground formations that project combat power from land into the other domains to enable joint force freedom of action, as well as seize positions of relative advantage and control key terrain to consolidate gains. So the idea here, when I say the game is multi-domain from the ground up, is that every unit. So what I imagine is you have a unit like, 1st Battalion, 1st Brigade, and 1st Battalion, 1st Brigade has a ground land combat value of some sort, and an air combat value of some sort, and a maritime combat value of some sort, and a space and cyberspace. And so the idea is the ability of units to project combat power from one domain to another is what we're really talking about, is highlighted, not de-emphasized. It's actually highlighted. So this 1st Battalion, 1st Brigade has the ability to conduct cyber attacks. It has the ability, to whatever level or whatever, it would have to be determined, but has the ability to, again, project combat power into the maritime domain. Again, I'm just thinking this through. How it's done, we'll see. So synchronizing domain windows across the 5 domains in degraded conditions as envisioned in MDB will require a new generation of innovative mission command solutions and doctrine, organization, training across the joint force. So this is, again, basically so warfare on the tabletop, 2 forces in multiple domains, in all domains, and in degraded conditions, of course, as each side tries to gain superiority over the other in each domain. Again, how can this be envisioned? How can this be envisioned in a war game format? And we have multi-domain battle tonight, tomorrow in the future fight, war on the rocks. As our relative strengths, especially in technology, are challenged by near-peer adversaries, domains become contested and communications are no longer assured. So there would be a heavy, basically communications battle. There would be a digital battle. I envision a real, robust, and again, overt, a cyber battle, a communications battle, a digital and signals battle, and in a real way. So your attacks and your defenses in the cyberspace domain are just the whole point, of course, of the war game is to show that the player who can exploit to the maximum capability, or to the maximum extent, capabilities in all domains, and together should have the upper hand, you know, assuming that that can be modeled that way, but that is the idea. So you're trying to erode the adversary's you know, command and control capabilities through cyber attacks, space attacks, and air attacks, or what have you. Ultimately, the multi-domain task force will pave the way for the U.S. Army to counter anti-access area denial challenges as part of a wider joint effort. This again would be something to experiment if there's a good war game of this type. If there's a good war game based on the multi-domain battle concept, then a multi-domain task force, you know, the corollary to what I'm envisioning is, if the modeling can be done well enough, then there should be a way, and this would also be any war game, because we had this in the past. We don't have that anymore. Actually, I take that back. We might have it in coin games, but I don't know. Don't play the coin games. I don't know that we have them. I'll reserve judgment whether what I'm saying isn't being done in that area of gaming, but I'm saying when it comes to, you know, high intensity, force on force, high tech warfare, we don't have games, as far as I can tell, that are looking forward and are basically being experimental. We've had those in the past, as far as I can tell. So the corollary here, of course, is that if the modeling is good enough, the players should be able to, and I envision the players being able to organize their own forces. I mean, to task organize in logical ways, and then that could be extrapolated for the idea that, oh yeah, in multi-domain battle there might be fast changing task organization. That's, I mean, some people write about this. It's already being contemplated that task organization is even done differently in the future. So again, it would be great if that could be explored in the war game. By the way, I am talking roughly, we're not talking about next year warfare. We're talking warfare really like 2030 to 2050. Again, the war game I'm talking about, based on this type of multi-domain warfare. So this is kind of like after multi-domain battle concept has become doctrine. This kind of assumes that MDB is doctrine now, and it presumes that we have multi-domain battle organized forces, and then we have the capabilities. So we're talking about robots and other types of autonomous systems. We're talking about, you know, futuristic cyberspace and space capabilities. So all of that goes with, we are talking about future warfare. And actually, maybe, you know, now that I think about it, maybe I should not push this too far into the future. But it's not really next year. I mean, it has to be. No. Actually, maybe it's warfare that could be done with what we have now and what is in, let's say, R&D. Maybe that, but not futuristic, like sci-fi, not sci-fi. Okay. We got from concept to combat, making multi-domain battle real. There we go again. That graphic, unified land operations on the right. So this just gives an idea. We are talking about, you know, civilians on the battlefield. We're talking about unconventional forces, satellites as real game, you know, pieces, so to speak. The Army's current framework was laid out in a previous edition of FM 3.0, Air Land Battle Doctrine. which taught commanders not to wait for the Soviets to come to them, but rather to strike deep into the enemy rear echelons with aircraft and precision weapons. At the same time, their ground forces clashed along the front line. Again, any good war game that claimed to incorporate air-land battle ideas should have shown that. And so now, looking forward, I'm talking about a war game that shows players striking deep into cyberspace. Striking deep into enemy electromagnetic spectrum access capabilities, control, blah blah blah. Multi-domain battle, air-land battle, once more with feeling. Closely follows that the logic of air-land battle is that it calls upon the force to integrate and synchronize joint inter-organizational multinational capabilities to create temporary windows of superiority. It would be great if the war game could actually show players exploiting these windows of superiority as you cross capabilities from one domain to another, across multiple domains throughout the depth of the battlefield. But it has to be done in a way that's kind of believable. And by the way, with this in mind, I'm thinking units might be modeled in the form of capability and capacity. Well, more on that later. But yeah. The point being, of course, that if MDB becomes reality, numbers matter, but numbers don't matter as much. So numbers matter, but there are other things that are just as important as numbers. And I'm talking, numbers. That's exactly what I mean by numbers, right? Over the past year, the Army also, so this back to multi-domain task force, which is being experimented with. Well, actually, I should use my terms properly. It's being, the idea is being developed right now. An organization of 1,500 soldiers, scaled down version of the 40,000 soldier brigade. The task force will work as an experimental force to test tactics and methods of future formations. And this again is what I'm saying. If a war game could do this, it'd be cool to be able to, show a multi-domain task force fighting on real ground, Suwalki Gap, against a real opponent. The Russian military with their latest, greatest. A Russian force with the Russians' most advanced capabilities and even their experimental capabilities. Be great. Multi-domain battle. Tactical implications. Over the horizon. Finally, oh, I lost my highlighting. Well, it's right there. It's kind of a past U.S. hallmarks of battle have been superiority through numbers. I was just talking about that. Technology and tempo. The foundation of American warfare must pivot to flexibility. Flexibility is part of what, let's think in game terms. In game terms, flexibility is, again, this rapidly changing but real task organization. Real meaning the war game would have to show real task organization capabilities, not frankly the pretty simplistic task organization that has been shown in some war games up to today. Anyways, more on that later. Creating options, enabling freedom of action, increasing. So again, enabling freedom of action. There is a game sense in this. Something like, well, actually, there's another modern war game out there. It's not even that recent, that shows different C2 levels through the number of activation sequences you get. So I mean, that's very simplistic, but so when it says enabling freedom of action, you actually, in game terms, you have this rising and fall, or this expanding and contracting, again, freedom of action in game terms, increasing synchronization and placing the enemy on the horns of multiple dilemmas. That, of course, is, again, if the war game has to show, it doesn't have to show. I want the war game to show, again, that the player who's exploiting attacks, just broadly speaking, in all domains, in the right sequence, beats an opponent who even has overwhelming numbers. I mean, that's what Airland Battle was about. In another context, that's what it was about. That's what it boiled down to. And Airland Battle games, Airland Battle based games, were supposed to show that. I guess you could say to varying degrees they were successful, but yeah. So it's kind of the overall theme is, I've seen a few Airland Battle based games, and that's past. And now I'm thinking future, this emerging concept, which is not doctrine yet. It's still being built, a plane that's still being built as we're going here. But to have a war game that allows one to explore the ideas now and on tabletop is the idea.